Welcome to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, bringing you insight into classical education and its unique emphasis on human virtue and moral character, responsible citizenship, content-rich curricula, and teacher-led classrooms. Now your host, Scot Bertram.
Thanks for listening. The Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast is part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. You also can find more information on topics and ideas discussed on this show at our website, k12.hillsdale.edu. We're joined by John Punt. He is a music teacher at Seven Oaks Classical School in Ellettsville, Indiana, also a master teacher for Hillsdale College K-12 Education. John, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little about what you do as a music teacher at Seven Oaks and about the school itself.
Yeah, sure thing. So I've been at Seven Oaks going on my fifth year now, and I've been teaching a combination of grades all the way from K through 12. Very appreciative to have a co-laborer in the work as well. And a lot of what we do in the music classroom is based on, yes, teaching music theory, also teaching music history, music listening and appreciation, and also making sure that the kids have a chance to put that all into practice by singing. That's all the way down to kindergarten, but that includes our high school choir and any ensembles that wind up poking their heads out. So.
How did you get where you are today? Has it always been a classical education focus for you?
It hasn't been for me. I would say that it feels like I received something like a classical education growing up. I went to a Christian school as a young student, and then public school, actually, with some wonderful, wonderful teachers. And I'm very grateful for the education that I did get, because it doesn't seem like if I had been a couple years later, that would be where things were. Yeah, so I actually went through to Idaho State University, got my undergraduate in opera performance there, and then went out to Indiana University in Bloomington, which is just down the road from Seven Oaks from us, and did my graduate work there. And at that point, just seemed like being in higher ed and academia was not the place to be. And so I found Seven Oaks and some great friends down there, and really, really loved and appreciated getting to explore what classical education is, and also just, the opportunity to work with students who care about what we're learning, who love what we're learning, and whose eyes really light up as they see things they may never have seen otherwise.
As a music teacher, do you then deal with students in every grade throughout the school?
Yes.
That's different than most teachers at Seven Oaks or anywhere else. What about that opportunity for you to really work with students from the youngest age to the oldest age at Seven Oaks?
Yeah, I think we've done something unique in our grade split for the two music teachers. So we almost alternate each and every grade. And I remember the reasoning being given to me why that would be the case. And I think it's difficult to stay really passionate about what you're doing if you don't get those opportunities to dig a bit deeper. I absolutely applaud and bow down to kindergarten, first grade, second grade teachers, because they do what I could not do all day long. And at the same time, right, being involved with K1, 2, 3 really forces you to be on top of things, to know your classroom management, to know the material so well that you can explain it to young people. And so I think that opportunity to provide a balanced education to a balanced scale of kids makes you a better and more balanced teacher. And I certainly love seeing faces of all ages lighting up. And it's not just about sort of me getting to enjoy teaching deep things, but also just to see joy.
Where does music fit in a traditional education, and how might it be different if someone walked in to Seven Oaks and saw music education there?
Yeah, I think music in a traditional education has sort of fallen into the place of some kind of entertainment, some kind of break throughout the day. Maybe it has some vestiges of having been an important part of the curriculum. Obviously, music is a part of education. I mean, the Greeks considered that a very important part of forming the whole human being. So it's always been a part of what we've thought of in education. And I think what's happened is over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, that has sort of just fallen out of an esteemed place. So I think when it comes to what music looks like in the classical classroom, what we're often talking about is, again, yes, forming these disciplines, yes, acknowledging music theory and music history, but I often talk about the importance of understanding music as a part of historical cultures, as as reminding us that people who lived in previous eras were humans, right? And music is a way of expressing who we are as people. Everybody's done it. Everybody does it. So there is no escaping the fact that when we talk about music, we're really digging deep into something that is true for all generations. And if we ignore that, we are sort of cutting ourselves off from previous generations, which is not only unwise, but also just doesn't develop flourishing human beings.
You mentioned you talk a little theory, some history, listening, and appreciation. Is that across the board throughout all grade levels? Is there a little bit of all those things throughout the years?
Yeah, and as I've been acknowledging with some other music teachers, it makes our job very difficult, right? Oftentimes, music is sort of getting squeezed out of curriculum. I used to think this was just some, pro whatever argument. We need more money. We want our jobs to be whatever. But I actually have found that even amongst some classical schools, it's difficult to carve that time out and make sure that the music teachers do have the opportunity to do what they need to do and the time to do it in the classroom. So yeah, we are talking theory, not only written theory, but developing the skills of reading music and singing music, the actual skills of singing music. Again, music history, as we acknowledged, and listening to music, and what does that mean? Even perhaps writing and talking about music, having these deeper conversations. Trying to squeeze all that into a 30-minute class period once a week can be a real challenge. So yeah, what my role as the master teacher of music is really trying to equip teachers to be able to do that. Hopefully, many are being able to carve out more time, and that's true. But yeah, that's across the board from K all the way through 12. What we're working at is developing all these skills in all our students.
There are similar questions that come up in this conversation as come up in, for example, physical education, meaning where do you find the time? How often do you need to have it? Is it an everyday sort of activity, learning music, taking part in physical education? What's an appropriate amount of time in a day, in a week, for students to be exposed to music?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about how sort of fundamental to being human music is, and I think there's an element in which students do need to be exposed to music on a constant basis. Now, does that have to happen in the music classroom? I don't know, but younger students are experiencing this, right? When they sing their grammar songs, when they work on a variety of different things, right? We memorize well, we think well. We have this new history timeline song coming out, so we understand and anticipate that music helps students both in their intellectual and in their moral flourishing, and so. Yeah, I think more than once a week is a definite yes, right? If we can see students for an extended focused period of time thinking about music in the music classroom 2 to 3 times a week or more, that's wonderful. But the opportunity to see music being incorporated into other aspects of the curriculum, like I would say that it should be, like I said, human flourishing is a real byproduct of that incorporation.
John Punt is with us. He is music teacher at Seven Oaks Classical School in Ellettsville, Indiana, also a master teacher for Hillsdale College K-12 education. How does studying music complement what students are doing in other subjects across the school? Yeah,
so as I mentioned before, music does give us sort of another side of humans, of people throughout history, but we do see music incorporated, on the one hand, music being influenced by other arts and other disciplines. So, right, when a composer sets poetry to music, we're engaging with literature. When a composer is inspired by something, or even just having written a piece of music, they are a product of their time. And so we have to understand the history, the art, the literature that inspires them. And in that way, sort of music is reflected by other things. I think of Richard Wagner, the famous operatic composer that turned most people off of opera. He was one who sort of said that everything needs to feed into the storytelling, right? So when we talk about the story that we're presenting, the music should help that story, but so should the costumes, so should the sets, so should the lighting, so should the theater itself. He designed his own opera theater to put on his own operas. And in one way, he sort of said music is the queen of the arts, if you will. Everything should feed into that. But then you also see throughout history that music ought to be feeding back into everything else, right? That a great study of music is going to inform your understanding of what literature is. A great understanding of music is going to to give you a feel for what people were like in history. And it's also going to engage with art. It's going to engage with any number of other disciplines. And so I think this sort of two-way street of communication from music to the other subjects is very, very important. And that also is what separates a classical music education from a traditional one.
Maybe specifically in the realm of, say, history, can students get a better understanding, comprehension of what was happening around these times, listening to various forms of music from those eras?
Yeah, I think oftentimes, and we've been going through this week at this conference, sort of how to teach music history, and I do just what you're talking about, right? Bring up some architecture, bring up some historical events, and it's especially true in the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. A lot of the music is shaped by philosophy, right? It's shaped by the worldview, and they say, well, we have to write music in this format or this structure because this is the way that people's brains understand things, and you have to present it in this way, otherwise you're not presenting a logical argument, and if the music isn't logical, then it should be thrown out. So absolutely, you need a proper study of history and the history of philosophy and art and so on in order to really understand music in its context, and we certainly want to be doing that with our students before they go poo-pooing classical music, because it doesn't make sense to them, right? We aren't a product of that time in history. I use a quote in my history classes by L.P. Hartley at times, a great historian, and he said, "The past is a foreign country. They do things differently there," right? And just like we wouldn't travel to another country in the world without some kind of preparation and expect everything to be the same, we ought not to do that when we look at history as well. And music is right along with all of that.
Is there an expectation in your classroom or perhaps other classical education classrooms that the students at some point will be able to play an instrument, whether it be the recorder or something a little more advanced than that?
Yeah. I've forbidden the recorder from my music classroom, so I don't want to suffer that. I don't want parents to suffer that. So no, we do have some glockenspiels, right, small xylophones that are a classroom set that allow our youngest students to be working on keyboard skills, so that when they are in middle school and we're teaching them basic piano skills, none of that is foreign to them. At our school we focus on piano, keyboard skills. And I know that there are other schools that are picking up, ukulele, recorder, penny whistles, things like that sort of just develop a well-rounded musician who's able not just to sing, but to read music and a variety of other things. And again, I think the piano is one that many of us grew up with pianos in the home, whether somebody knew how to play it or not.
Right.
So that has sort of faded over the years, that element in homes. But it's certainly an instrument that serves students well, and I think we ought to be equipping students with as many skills as we can.
Unlike other subjects, history, science, English, music is a place in which some students likely are receiving additional teaching outside of the classroom, at home with a private teacher. So you're going to have some students that are far more advanced than others in any of the subjects we talked about, theory or reading music or playing music. How do you balance that curriculum inside the classroom to meet the needs of students who are just beginning and those who are advanced?
Yeah, so I think part of that is helped by the fact that we have such a variety of things we have to include in a music lesson, right? Somebody who is taking piano or who's taken piano for 10 years or violin or what have you is only going to be so far ahead of everybody else. Yes, in music theory, they're going to be a ways, but music history, they often haven't studied. The ability to sing is often underdeveloped in a student who's focusing on another instrument. So just the mere fact that we're studying so many disciplines within music does help to balance that out. But at the same time, that does cause some consternation if you're starting out a new year with middle schoolers or high schoolers and have some transfer students that are new to the school and haven't had this built foundation of music skills and music theory. Yeah, that can be very difficult. And so I know that's caused me and many other educators to try to figure out, what's the without taking shortcuts, the best and most efficient way to get these ideas into students' heads. And I think that's, again, caused me to understand music better so that I can teach it even to kindergarten, first, second grade in a way that makes sense to them and allows them to grow as musicians even at the age of 5 or 6.
How should parents think about their students' music education? How can they encourage what's happening inside the classroom?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think parents should consider that music is an important part of their students' education. I know that before I arrived at Seven Oaks, when our other teacher, Rachel Holland, was teaching, that was a bit of a fight for her to get people on board. It was a bit of a fight to get students to just sing in the classroom. And I'm very grateful that I did not have to put up with that fight when I came to the school. So on the one hand, having parents who are on board with the mission of making music and understanding that that's part of human development and not just some sort of pleasurable activity for 20 or 30 minutes a week, but really part of forming character in a person. So that's the first thing is parents that are supportive of the mission of music. Another thing is having parents adopt music themselves. Mm-hmm. I think, I tell my students at the start of the year, I don't expect that I'm going to be producing a classroom full of Mozarts, right? Or Beethovens or whoever it is. I just hope to have students who throughout their life, if they have an opportunity once to go see a symphony or an opera or a classical guitar concert, will go just once in their life, right? Somebody who's going to not just turn their backs on classical music after they leave my classroom. And so parents ingraining a family culture that appreciates classical music, not that has it on in the background all the time, not that they're forcing it down their kids' throats if they don't want it. But I give an assignment once a year in middle school where I just ask them to go attend a concert and write one page about it. That does mean that their family is probably going to have to bring them somewhere. Yeah. They may have to make a financial investment. Not in Bloomington. We have hundreds, if not a couple thousand free concerts every single year because of the music school. But just forcing the parents to go out with the child, maybe multiple children, make an evening of it, make a habit of enjoying a family culture that appreciates some kind of non-pop music. I think that's a beautiful start.
What do students tend to embrace? What do they like? Where do they find the fun in music?
Yeah, I usually have two sort of hot spots that kids will say they love at the end of a year. One is the romantic era. It's an age full of embracing emotion, embracing passion, telling stories, and middle schoolers tend to resonate with embracing passion and emotion. And who doesn't love a good story? Mm-hmm. The other one is jazz. I think for many students, it's just so different from everything else that's come before it. Yeah. They don't love bebop. They don't love what comes too late into jazz. But boy, the break from other things that have been there and moving into just a totally different way of thinking about music is wonderful, and they love it.
We've mentioned a couple of times you're a master teacher for Hillsdale College K-12 education. What does that mean? How do you interact with other music teachers throughout Hillsdale K-12 schools?
Well, I joke sometimes when I tell people that I'm a master teacher, whatever that means. I certainly don't think I've mastered teaching by any stretch of the imagination. So my hope is just to be of service to other teachers, and in doing so, right, sometimes that means answering emails, talking about what might the future of our program look like in our situation. We have these students who want this ensemble. What can we offer? I'm struggling to find resources, talking about this composer or that. And so I have been a part of a couple of projects that we're working on in the K-12 office. One of those being these timeline songs that we were just releasing. So those will be fun to see students getting their hands on and their voices around. We're also putting together a songbook of all of the songs that are in the curriculum so that these become easier for teachers to access rather than spending dozens of hours on Google at the beginning of the year. Hopefully they can just have something in their hands to work with. And the last of them is writing a book on music history understood classically, right? What should our teachers be teaching? How should they be teaching it? What are some approaches for that? And again, rather than spending hours and hours researching, is there a simple and quick guide that's going to give them true information that actually points them to the goal of a classical music education? So that's been a lot of my work, is these projects and writing to support teachers in every school.
What are some of the more common questions you get from music teachers at our schools?
Yeah, I would say a lot of it comes back to sort of where can I find X, Y, and Z. If that's a piece of music, that seldom happens. But oftentimes it is sort of, I come from a public school background, I come from a traditional education background, and I'm not sure how the classical music classroom is different. So a lot of it is educating what are some ways that we can differentiate the classical music classroom. And then, many other questions are, as I mentioned, sort of what can we do with our program now? We have parents who want to form a strings ensemble, but we don't have any instruments. Is there a direction we can go? Are there grants? Or the opposite of that. We'd like to start something, but we just don't have any interest in it. Where can we go? Or what are some possible other options for us. And it's great to have those conversations because some of those situations apply to us at Seven Oaks. And so a solution may come up through somebody else's thinking that we would never have thought of. And it's great to have that back and forth.
John Punt is music teacher at Seven Oaks Classical School in Ellettsville, Indiana, and a master teacher for Hillsdale College K-12 Education. John, thanks so much for joining us here on the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast.
Thank you so much.
I'm Scot Bertram. We invite you to like us on Facebook. Search for Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education. You also can follow us on Instagram at Hillsdale_K12. Hillsdale_K12 on Instagram. Thank you for listening to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.